Welcome to Able Pathways podcast. I'm Annabelle Ferber, founder of Able Pathways, where we provide executive function coaching for neurodiverse individuals and professional development for educators. Our podcast explores the windy journeys of learning and growth. Each episode, we travel the unique pathways taken by a diverse range of interesting people as they reflect on pivotal moments in their lives that led to unexpected insights and transformation. Through these conversations, we hope to illuminate the infinite pathways for how we grow and learn. Visit our show notes for links, information about our speakers, and resources mentioned on this episode. I'm so excited to have you on the podcast today, Puru.
Thank you.
Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Puru. I'm currently living in India, Delhi. Occupation-wise, I would say I work within the adventure travel field. That's my primary occupation. I'm a legal consultant, as well as work within just managing the operations for one UK-based adventure travel company called Follow Alice. And other than that, I'm part of a non-profit called Katalytic Education Foundation, and we run a school called the Sikkim Charter School in the northeast region of India in Sikkim, Gangtok. So that's about it. And I think as we keep talking, you'll get to know more about me.
About your adventures. So, before we get into your life's journey, what are you entertained by these days? What do you like to watch or read or listen to?
Well, I have been watching this one particular show called Dark. It's this German sci-fi show, which is very, very interesting and very cool. Been watching that with my partner lately. It just always fascinates me. Again, it's just one of those things that really grasps you right at episode one, and you just keep watching it and expecting it to just make sense at certain point. I think the last book that I was reading was Sapiens, and then Psycho-Cybernetics by Maxwell Maltz. So currently I'm in the phase of my life where I am enjoying a lot of, I wouldn't call it self-help, but more so how to organize yourself and understanding human psychology, your own psychology, how to better yourself, things like that, which is interesting to me currently. But in general, just prefer fiction.
Yeah, fun. For yourself, like whether it's self-care or whether it's just things that make you feel happy, what do you like to do that brings you some joy?
That's an interesting question and a very hard one to answer. I think happiness is such an abstract term in terms of, what do we do to be joyful or get or be happy within our lives. I personally believe for me, the most happy that I am, it's around, it's when I'm around the people that I love. So probably spending time with perhaps my partner, my family, when I'm very in the moment, in the present, that's something that gives me a lot of joy. But other than that, I suppose a lot of physical training. That's something that's very rigorously implemented, at least in my life. I do a lot of running, a lot of trekking, of course, because of the nature of my work and what I love to do inherently is also what my work is. So I have to train for it. So a lot of gym, yoga, running, all of it gives it a bit more purpose. I think doing hard things or quote unquote hard things, things that perhaps you wouldn't want to do when you wake up in the morning, those things give my life, I suppose, a bit more purpose, and that purpose provides more contentment. And so at least that's the phase of life that I currently am in.
Beautiful. So, what got you into, and I know that your background, you studied as a lawyer,
Yeah.
and so what brought you to follow Alice?
Well, I think for that, I perhaps would have to talk a little bit more about my formative years in life. So when I was right now 12, 13 years old, and my mother, her roots are from the mountains of India. So the Himalayas, as you would say. She's, her family was from Himachal, which is the state in India that is in the Himalayas. even though she did not grow up in that, but I was very aware of it. And then I happened to have gone to the mountains, just visiting, and just I think it's just one of those things that once you go to the mountains, you, at least from the Himalayan perspective, you just keep want to, you either leave it satisfied or you leave it with an itch that can only be satisfied once you're back within the mountains. I think anyone who loves nature, loves to hike, would understand what I mean. And that same kind of bug got me then. I think trekking and hiking became such a important part of my life that even though growing up in the Indian culture and just in India in general, academics are given so much credence to that you end up doing something academic in nature. And even though I did love pursuing what I did pursue in my university life, which is law, I always inkled to hiking and trekking and natural spaces in general. And when I did go to the UK to study law in Lancaster University, my specialty being international law, which in these current times is very funny to think of because international law is not something that we can fondly speak of these days. But when I did go into the university, or was in the university, even then I was part of the hiking society. And one of the main things that really got me attracted into that university was because it had the biggest hiking society in England, and it was so close to the Lake District, which are the hills and the mountains, if you will. Mountains, yeah, in England. So yeah, it just all surrounded with that. And when I started working my corporate job right after graduation, something that perhaps I wasn't quite satisfied with, at that point I started reaching out to a lot of adventure travel organizations, just telling them about myself, right? I had, at that point, I had already gotten my qualifications to be a mountain lead guide from a mountaineering school here in India, called NIMAS, National Institute of Mountaineering and Allied Sports. And I would just pitch to these adventure travel companies that, hey, I'm a qualified lawyer. I've done my graduation. I'm currently working. I also have my mountaineering qualifications. What can I do for you? And there was a lot of rejections to begin with, a lot of no shows, no replies. Eventually, I think follow Alice, I still remember I reached out to them over WhatsApp, of all places, just a quick message, just giving them the same pitch. And I think the individual who replied to me, Natasha, she basically said, let's get on a call, and the rest is history.
When was that?
Oh, that was 2022,
Okay.
or 2023, January
Yeah.
2023. Yeah.
And they're based out of Delhi?
No, they're based out of the UK.
Oh, so, but you said you're in Delhi now. So are
Yeah.
you helping them like expand, or how does that work?
Yeah. So basically, at that point, I'd already come back to Delhi. I was just visiting family, and I was supposed to go back, join my corporate job in 2023, later in 2023, back in England. But that was the time where I kind of figured out that this is not what I want to do. I had that unsettled feeling within myself wherein I was very unsure of, okay, sure, this will pay my bills, and sure, I have the qualifications needed for this, but does this really excite me? I felt, the sinking feeling in my heart that I felt that, oh, I'll wake up bored every single day and just not excited to do what I wanted to do. And that's the point when I started exploring alternate options again, coming from Indian family. It's very important for you to have kind of figured out what you want to do, or at least have some idea of how you're going to go about your life, which perhaps from the perspective of my family, or anyone's family, is a good perspective to have, because it's important to know the direction you're taking in life. So I was quite in two minds, and that's when I reached out to them. And they were a UK based company, but they wanted someone for the Himalayan region. So my speciality within, I suppose in international law, as well as my background within trekking and mountaineering, is what really got me an in. And to begin with, I just started off with doing sales. And then, it led me to just managing operations. And then, now even handle legal cases for them at times. And just in general, now my official title is the general manager of All Alice Himalayas. So because I manage this part of their world, it just helps that I'm here. But I still work kind of sort of UK hours. Again, because our for analysis are again just to talk a little bit more about Falal. It's just such an incredible organization in the way it's structured and what it stands for as well, because we're all over the world. We're registered in the UK. Founders are Swiss and German. Our team is worldwide. We started our operations off in Kilimanjaro, Tanzania. So a lot of our team is based out of Africa. So I currently work South African hours. So I work from my 11 a.m. to my 6, 7 p.m. So it kind of fits within that timing area and just, time zones. So it's fairly interesting, again, working with teams all across the world. It's always fascinating.
While you were speaking, I don't know why I didn't do this before, but I'm on the website. Wow,
Yeah.
fun. Oh my gosh, yeah, it's all over the place. A lot in the mountains. A lot in
Yeah.
Nepal. Okay. Cool. Wonderful. What you mentioned a little bit that, there's been an expectation since you were young to figure out what you want to do, but it sounds like you were able to both seek that clarity, but maybe not take a typical path. Would you say that your path to where you are today was a typical journey, or how is it unusual?
Well, I wouldn't call it typical at all. I think anyone from my age bracket, I mean, I'm 26 years old, who's grown up in India, if they're listening to this, they would know this. It's such an uh, weird or interesting path, if you would, that I have taken, and it's more so where my life led me to. I think it's less about what I consciously did, but more about how life happened to me that led me to kind of this direction in life. Again, I've so much respect for people who are able to kind of go ahead with things that, you know, they perhaps don't want to do, but needs to be done. I think, again, since my formative years, one of the things that perhaps was very clear to me now in retrospect is I am on the spectrum of some sorts in terms of how I think, how I view the world. When I look back at my early childhood, my primary education, I remember the times where I would just not write the exam or just submit my unit tests and exams just half written and half filled out just because I was done. I didn't feel like doing it. And my teachers and my parents, bless my parents, very supportive people, but they were always very surprised that, hey, you've done fairly well with the few questions you've answered or with the 70% of the exam that you've answered, but why have you left the rest? And I was just like, I just didn't want to do it. And I never really got why it was with me up until I just realized that, oh, I cannot do things or cannot force myself to perhaps at times, at least at that point of my life, do things that I don't want to do, which led to a lot of, right, I'd get hyper fixated with certain things which I would absolutely love and just delve into it, right? Perhaps for me, and I was I think just a small anecdote from my childhood is that I was so fascinated by sci-fi and, aliens when I was in second or third grade. So when I was around 7, 8 years old, that I ended up writing a book about it all. And my parents just casually mention it to me every now and then that, oh, remember the time when you wrote a book
Wrote a
about
book?
aliens? Yeah. And I was like, oh, I forgot about that. But I remember just being stuck to a computer just 8 hours a day on end during my summer vacation, just writing that book. And in retrospect, makes sense. But I think that's what led me to this, right? Nature always calmed my mind. Nature always just trekking and mountain. It always fascinated me from a perspective of, oh, everything around me that I see right now, it existed before everyone in this world was alive, and it will continue to exist when everyone in this world will die. And there's something both poetic and beautiful about it because it puts your impermanence of your life into perspective, right? That this rock is going to stay here. I can die, the world can go to war, the world can come back from war. More than likely, this rock is still going to be there. And I think that feeling stuck to me really early on in my life. And that's what kind of always grasped me about being in natural spaces. So even though not deliberately, but at the back of my mind, all the decisions I made were kind of associated with it. I got into a lot of universities within the UK, which perhaps a lot of other people might have preferred going to, just on paper. But I chose to go to Lancaster, again, an incredible university, because it was close to a natural space, because it was close to the hills there. And that's something that I feel is what really led me to make these decisions a bit away from the legal field. I loved studying law because, again, law is about figuring things out. And that's what, again, even being in natural spaces or trekking, or ever since I was a kid, I love doing, just figuring things out. But in particular, just the peace it all brings is what led me to perhaps making this decision.
Yeah. I think it's incredible that you didn't give up on yourself or you didn't give up on like these strengths that you have. And I mean, you probably did struggle with conformity a little bit, but it sounds like you
Oh,
were
yeah.
able to
I
like,
struggled with it a lot. I still
yeah,
struggle with it so much, specifically in my formative years. There wouldn't be a day, especially when I grew into my teenage years, right, where I would think that what's wrong with me? And why
right.
can't I just,
Why
just
can't I
do
be like
this?
everybody else? Make myself. Because what you're describing too is like that brain's ability to pay attention. And some people have an easier time of forcing their attention somewhere, whether they
Yeah.
are intrinsically interested in it or not. And I think some people's brains, it's almost impossible to force focus on things that aren't interesting to the individual. And I think the world would be a much better place if we acknowledge that brains aren't the same and kids aren't the same and that
Yes.
that is a good thing actually because you
It's a great
have
thing. Yeah.
as you described, like, you can hyperfixate, you can be sort of an incredible thinker, an incredible contributor to the world, but not if you were forced in conformity, not if you were in London in an office practicing law or whatever, right? Like,
Yeah.
um, yeah, so
No, exactly. How I pose it to people around me when I try and explain what perhaps I understood from my struggles is that, human beings are kind of like an ant colony. You can't expect a soldier ant to do the job of a queen ant. And that's what all of us are like. Our current education system is so streamlined into just making sure that everyone gets taught the same things in the same way, that it really doesn't align with the proportionalities of different neurodiversity that we currently have. And again, this is not something that we are recently finding out, right? Neurodiversity has been around since forever. We've just started to realize that, oh, that kid is just not weird. That kid just functions a bit differently than you do.
yeah. Where do you find or how like, I'm going to guess, like, there were people in your life or mentors in your life, but I'm more curious about for yourself, like, where you came to self-acceptance, to kind of embracing the way instead of fighting the way that your brain works, where you started flowing with the way that your brain works in a way. Can you speak to or remember, like, moments where
Yeah.
you because you would have had to fight all of the messaging that you got from the world, right? You would have had to kind of argue with and be like, "No, like, the way my brain works is amazing if I allow it to function the way that it wants to."
Yeah, I think well, to be very honest, I still struggle with quite a bit. Just accepting how I am and how I perceive things, and perhaps at time even struggle with, hey, what if I could? I could be better. I could be doing more. And again, that's conditioning since I was a child. That's something that I kind of grew up listening to. That you're doing great, but only if you would also do this. So it's kind of conditioned within me.
Yeah.
But I feel for me, acceptance came from a place where I realized what I was great at, which is just understanding people and looking at and understanding nuances. Again, which also led me to kind of do law. It was just an understanding of a different perspective that I have towards things, which I realized that, oh, perhaps my peers, people around me, do not really have it. And, certain friends, certain people that I remember really pointed that out. Perhaps a teacher who was just surprised how I could solve an equation in maths without really understanding the formula and stuff like that, because I could just visualize the problem that in my university in crim law, I was the like in one of the subjects, in one of the questions, I ended up doing very well, better than I think anyone else within our class, because I just had because I was just able to understand certain anomalies within that question so much better. And I think these small little things were always affirmative. But it's very hard to not, go and think that, but that's just a one-off instance. So if you have a more so holistic viewpoint, which again, I know that most people are very self-critical. It's hard not to be self-critical when perhaps the world around you isn't built to understand you the way that perhaps it needs to. But again, that's not a bad or a good thing. It's just a thing, right? Like we all have our
Mhm.
struggles. We all kind of live with it. For me, it wasn't really about acceptance. It was more so about learning to live with it and figuring out, okay, I have to live. How do I go about my life? And then eventually coming to realize, you know what, it's not so bad. It's not so bad. There are things that perhaps I can do that no one else can. And just that realization is what really got me going and led me to the place that I am currently.
Would you say that you mentioned problem solving as a strength. Would you include pattern recognition in that as part of your problem solving,
Yeah, yeah.
superpowers?
It's just at times it's just even I don't understand how I kind of can do it. It's happens
Mhm,
automatically at the back of my head.
mhm.
It's yeah, pattern recognition is definitely one of those things.
'Cause it is something like, that all humans have. It's a really important part of how we learn is to be able to recognize the pattern, connect it back to well, to recognize the pattern means you're connecting it back to something else you have seen or know, right? But you can build, um, an incredible like, a schema from there that allows you to
Right.
perceive, the larger picture of things, I would say, like, your brain can pay attention to those details, but then throw up the, like, "So, this is what this means," but I'm so curious about especially because you're done with school, or at least for now, you've been through that system. What would a school that was better suited to you have looked like? What would have been different?
I think that's a very interesting question, because that's something that again within the work that we are doing at KEF, Katalytic Education Foundation. Again, just to preface that I'm not extremely involved with on-ground operations. I was more so involved with setting it up. But ever since we have started doing it, that's been at the back of my head that, because we deal with kids, what can we do at a primary level, at a foundational level, that could help kids who perhaps don't perceive the world that most typical or atypical or sorry typical kids would perceive the world as. And in my case, I feel, I think knowledge of compassion and just in general kindness from educators would have been the best thing. I feel it's one thing to impart knowledge and another thing to make sure that knowledge is inculcated within the kids that you're teaching. And I think our current education system, at least for the one that I studied at India, it's very good at imparting knowledge. Like, we're all very good with knowing what to read, how to read, rote memorization, all of that things. But to understand the why of things is fairly important. And I think before that, just teaching what it means to be a human, that's the most important thing, right? And if you look all around the world currently, that's one thing that we lack. It's the compassion that we must feel for other living beings in general. And I feel that's something that we end up not doing, and it shows at least within the education system within our country since you're a kid, right? When you're in first, the second grade, the kid who's getting the A+ grades are being applauded. The ones that aren't are being told to raise their hands and stand the corner. So you're always segregated by the output you produce, and that I feel is so consequential to a kid growing up, that it could either completely deter the way they view themselves or could really push them into being excellent human beings. And part of it is, again, the capitalistic society that we live in. Everything is valued. What can you provide of value to me? That's very normal questions you get asked when you are in 10th grade. If there's an artist, at least within our education system, or at least when I was studying, they wouldn't be applauded for it. They'd be nudged into the sciences or something which contributes to society more, because that is more important to our society or to the world. And I feel if we were just taught compassion, well, not taught compassion, but because compassion might not be teachable per se, but at least practiced, right? If compassion is practiced with kids, that's what they will also produce for everyone around them. That would inherently have led to a much more just self-accepted version of myself, which I feel perhaps would have flourished even more, or someone like me would have flourished even more. Just compassionate support towards children who are going through what perhaps I went through, or going through even worse things. Because in retrospect, I see kids who were treated even worse, because again, I still was all right? I
Yeah.
was never academically bad. I was good enough to get by. But I remember kids, from my class, from other classes in my school, who would just be honestly tortured by teachers and students alike for not being good at studies. And that's such a in retrospect, that's such a weird thing to judge someone by, right? That how good of a person you are by the grades you are getting. As
Mm.
a, and that's what I think even I associated when I was a kid. I would look up to kids who would do really well in studies, or the ones that were set as examples by teachers, and look down upon kids who weren't doing well, and not really think about other qualities just as humans they had.
Yeah. It's funny that you bring that up because something that there's quite a number of let's say like young adults that I might work with who are neurodivergent, but they skated through school, they did okay enough.
Yeah.
Um, so maybe what I saw happening, which is uh, I'm calling like the plight of masking or the plight of doing well
Yep.
enough. The plight of passing is that when you're only valued for your academic results, not even the performance, just the end result of the exam or whatever, then your self-worth becomes entwined with being able to do something easily.
Mm.
Um, and then you get to young adulthood and you encounter something more difficult or something where maybe you do have to study or maybe you do start to struggle with the cognitive load of the task. But now it's an existential crisis
Yep.
because the act of struggling later when you've only been valued for things coming easily means that it's a absolute full system existential crisis if you fail ever, or if anything
Yeah.
is difficult and requires effort. Not to say life hasn't been difficult, but it's a particular kind of difficulty
Yep.
that now is like attacking your self-worth and your sense of yourself. So the damage that can also be done by being able to pass through and then not being able to separate out your value as a human being who is alive,
Yeah.
who has other types of abilities or emotional ability, like emotional intelligence or all these other sort of other things that we don't value in school as much. Um, and I see when my work, I see that over and over again, and it is a tragedy. Like, when I see what has now happened to this person as a young adult, and they do not love anything about themselves that isn't tied to that kind of
Productivity.
that productivity in whatever ways their society, their culture's defining that, because it's a little bit different everywhere, but still the same
Yeah.
formula.
You've put it so well. I think everything that you've, mentioned, I couldn't have put it better. And that's kind of exactly what I went through as well. When things started to get a little bit tough, I would just, start measuring my self-worth by it. And still I was able to get by, but I would see a decline in my grades or something, and that would just shatter my
Shatter
self-worth.
you.
Even though, like, objectively speaking, I wasn't doing anything enough to even get by with those grades, right? But inherently, I was just, oh, what is happening? Oh, I'm not doing.
Right?
I'm
And
not studying. It's just, yeah,
yeah, and I'm as, 20, 25 years into education, if you ask me to define intelligence, I have no idea.
yeah,
I'm not even sure that's a thing. So,
yeah.
like, I'm so far away from being able to understand that now because of what I've seen.
It
It
isn't.
was
I mean, it's so true, because if you think about, even historically, the most brilliant minds, or brilliant minds, quote unquote, that we say, the most intelligent one, Newton believed in alchemy. He wrote books and books, plethora of books about alchemy, about how to turn water into gold. Clearly one of the most, quote unquote, intelligent persons in the world. I think, and same with Beethoven, a musical genius, but so bad with his finances that he ended up, taking loans from all over the world. And I know people have all sorts of opinions, and a lot more, quote unquote, intelligent people, but we see this with so many tech geniuses in our current world who are perhaps really brilliant at what they are building, AI or whatever, but you see them talk about something which is nuanced or about society, you're like, oh, this guy's not all that. And that's, kind of how humans are. We are so multifaceted that we
yeah,
can't quite put intelligence in a bracket of IQ and judge each other by that measure. We must look beyond that.
and we need each other. We need,
Yeah.
that musician needed someone who's really good at finances in their life,
Yeah.
like, and that financial person needed him for that musical outlet. And now with technology, this idea of, like, that's the future, and you have to just learn how to use AI. I'm like, "Oh, no, we're going even more narrow," right? We're getting even smaller, and our brains are capable of so much more than that. Anyways,
Ex-
we are limiting ourselves here, and then we are causing harm to young people who could be leaning in to the brilliant architecture their brain has instead of fighting it?
Precisely. I mean, I see the same things, firstly, just before that, I think your point about, this community-based living, uh, I think, yeah, the people who wrote about communism, they were onto something. It just, sadly never got really explored in its true sense. But, everything else that you've mentioned about, value-driven society that we currently live in, or what I had spoken of, how students were viewed as when I was a kid, and all of, I can say that in retrospect. But now that I can say that in retrospect, I see that happening with the young adults my age, a bit younger than me, older than me, especially younger than me, a lot these days. Right? It's turned from what are your grades to, and this is kind of universal, I suppose. What do you do, or like, well, how much do you earn? And that's how you're valued as. And it's very upsetting at times to kind of see that, because you see such brilliant people be stuck doing things that they would never do, because just because they have to kind of get the respect of a job title, or get a respect from a job title, or earn money to sustain themselves. And that for me is heartbreaking to see. I suppose you see that a lot with young adults as well.
Yeah, the wealth disparity here is, I don't know how to compare it to India, but
Mm.
I know it's historical. I know that it's not unprecedented to have wealth disparity, but that is such a driver of this sort of entrapment system that we have for people, where they only value what they can take from others. It's sort of like that anti-compassion. It's like it's antithetical
Yeah.
to, to community. Everything is competition, and there is this sort of pervasive underlying view. It's funny, human beings created machines, but then we tried to almost mimic machines like they were a higher form than us. And so we look the way we build schools is like a machine. When people are even talking about the brain, they talk about it like it's a machine, like a billion times more powerful than a machine. So I don't know why we're doing that. It is
Yeah,
very,
machines are inspired by the
we
brain,
made
so
it. And we can do so much more. This idea, even in today, with AI, it's not even what we're calling it. That's not what it is. It isn't independently intelligent. It's not it doesn't come up with new thoughts. It regurgitates what we fed it in the first
yeah.
place. So it's very backwards what we've done here. Is almost, and I think we give up our humanity a little bit too, particularly with the machine model here, because the machine doesn't have feelings and doesn't, experience things outside of its programming, and I feel like
Mhm.
at least the society I live in, is very machine-based in every sense of that word, including treating children like success is that you look like everyone else. Success is the conformity,
Yeah.
and I think that's, like, death of culture and death of human intelligence, so take a very different view of it.
Yeah. I think what you've just said has made me also realize a little bit more about the question you asked me about
Mhm.
what I would perhaps would like to change within a system that I was brought up in. Of course, compassion and having the value of understanding the value of a human being is definitely an important one. But I
Yeah.
think another thing which needs to be taught is critical thinking, questioning why, and going to the depths of it till you irritate the person who's answering you is the only real way for me or for anyone else to actually grow. You must ask why, because if you just conform to what you've been told, it could be stupid. It could be as stupid as, why does 1 + 1 equate to 2? And perhaps that irritates someone, but there is an answer to that. I think questions like those, they're subdued. You never you that's where you get what you're speaking of, are kids who end up becoming and thinking like machines rather than actually be able to understand the nuances or critically think about a situation, because nothing in the world is black or white. You can't paint anything as specifically humans as all good, all bad, or where there is no middle ground. You must understand the nuances of why something happens. And that can only happen if critical thinking is inculcated in one or the other ways in very formative years of life, right? Where in a society where obedience is not something that's looked up to, at least within the Indian, and I suppose in the Eastern culture in general, obedience is something that is looked up to, right? Like parents would bawl out when they hear the teachers describe their kid as, oh, he's so obedient, which is, I would cry if someone described my niece or my nephew or an offspring that I perhaps have as an obedient. I wouldn't want my kids to be obedient. I want them to question authority. I want them to question what they're being taught. Now, that doesn't mean discipline doesn't have a place within society or within a curriculum. It does, but discipline and obedience does not go hand in hand. And you could
Mhm.
still be respectful, but that doesn't mean you have to be obedient to be respectful. You
Yeah.
must question people in authority. And sadly, again, I know you've traveled in India, so perhaps you would have also seen this within Asian culture as well. Questioning our parents, or in general, not per se in my personal situation, because I was promoted to do that. I was promoted to question my parents in one or the other way. They engaged with me most of the times. But in general, it's looked down upon to the point where you wouldn't marry someone that your parents don't, you know,
Mhm.
like for whatever reason, or you wouldn't really question certain beliefs that your parents have, which I think is so bad for the society, because it
Mhm.
just leads to people who are good at doing what they're told to do so, which I mean, history would suggest is never good.
It does prime obedience does prime the individual to be highly vulnerable
Yeah,
to a hierarchical power, a power above them. It's a like at that top down, and
yeah,
the danger, of course, is like if the top is not interested in the bottom, then your obedience is to something that doesn't value life, doesn't value your life or others' lives. I love asking folks about failures because we treat them in society as like things that we shouldn't talk about and sweep it under the rug. But I do think like things that didn't go as planned or things that we had other people had expectations that we perform well on and we end up not become those catalyst moments in a way. So,
yeah.
is there an experience you had that may have felt like failing at the time, but ultimately proved to be really beneficial in your life?
Hmm. I think so many. Primarily, one of the ones that I think just comes to my mind right away is this one particular rejection of job that I got from this corporate gig that I applied to, and I was just so excited for it because the pay was so good. And when you're right out of the university, getting a good pay is the key for you. And when I did not get that, that was a setback that because I was really counting on it. And eventually that's what led me to exploring the options that I did. It's kind of you gotta more so hit a certain rock bottom. And it's similar in other cases as well. I think there's so many failures in my life or so many expectations that I haven't been able to meet, honestly, that has led me to different directions, which perhaps or at the end of the day did turn out for the better in certain circumstances. And yeah, another one was during COVID, I suppose. I think that's the time where I was set to the first wave of COVID when I was set to came back from my university to back to India because of COVID. And it was a complete lockdown here in Delhi. And when there's a complete lockdown here in Delhi, it means that you can't even step out of your home and, no walks in the park and things like that. It's just one of those things which, again, comes
That
back
must
to
yeah.
yeah, just yeah. With mask, it's all good, but not even stepping out. That was just so difficult for me, considering how much I love being outdoors.
That's what I
You
was
know,
thinking, that must
yeah,
have been really hard for you. Yeah.
yeah. And at that point, there's a lot of setbacks. Wouldn't say failures, but setbacks in personal life.
Right.
I was going through a very patchy uh, a relationship which I wasn't happy in at all. And it was COVID anyway. We all were stuck in our houses, and I think most people weren't in the best mental position. Either I was, I lost both my grandparents just within a week. I had to have a surgery of appendicitis surgery. And all of this, by the way, from my relationship, from me breaking up with my girlfriend at that point, my partner, to at first, my grandfather passing away, then my grandmother passing away, my surgery, all of it happened in 9 days.
Oh my
Uh,
gosh.
yeah, yeah, all of it it was
That's world
one thing after the
altering.
other.
Yeah.
And all of it was in the middle of me taking exams from home for my university exams. Yeah. In fact, my surgery was, I started feeling the pain in my appendix while I was writing my EU law exam. And I thought that, oh, it must be constipation or something else, right? It never goes to your head that it's appendicitis. And it was peak COVID, so no hospitals were free enough to be able to accommodate me. But again, I'm privileged enough that I could go and opt in for a private hospital.
Yeah.
And even then, there were no beds. So for those 36 hours that I was in that hospital, they didn't give me any pain medication. because they basically told me that as soon as the doctors get free, they have time, we'll operate on you. Which means that if they give me pain meds, they can't operate
That's right.
on me till like 12 hours or something. But because the doctors were so damn busy, and rightfully so, in such a painful time for the entire world, it led to me just being in constant pain for 36 hours straight. And I remember some of the most brutal pain that I've ever experienced. And then right after the surgery, I had another my international law exam. And the thing is, for me at that point, exams mattered a lot because I was on a scholarship. So if I didn't maintain the grade that I, was supposed to, it would affect, right? And right in the middle of this operation, just before that, my grandfather passed away, and right after, my grandmother passed away. And while I was and then that was the point where actually I've kind of reached out to my university, my folks, my law school, and I was just like, listen, this is the situation I am in. I don't even want to just like try in terms of taking exams and stuff like I'm just letting you know. And I'm like half medicated right now. I don't even know what I'm typing, but I just wanted to inform because I mean I'm taking exams, but I don't know how well they'll go. And I think the kind of support and compassion the law school of Lancaster University showed me then is perhaps one of the reasons why I also think I'm the person that I am, and also, led me into kind of going into education because I saw these people being absolutely accepting, understanding, and they accommodated me to a level which I hadn't ever experienced from any educational institution or any sort of person in authority for that matter. They let me not just retake those exams, but they basically said that, hey, we'll accept the exams that you have given. We let you take another set of exams, the retests. Whichever one you did better in, we'll accept those results. They also, within my final grading, made a note of the situation I found myself in and increased my grade corresponding to the same, which to me was just insane, specifically from like, a top 10 university in England who are very driven by the kind of students they have, the kind of students they want. For me, that was exceptional to see that kind of, uh, you know, just compassion from individuals that perhaps I've only met a couple of times and then perhaps I wouldn't meet at all. And that for me was amazing. But right when this was happening, coming back to this is the rock bottom, is when I had to go and do my kind of my mountaineering course. And unfortunately, I built myself to a point where I was able to train at the terrace of my house, and then I kind of rolled my ankle, which was okay. I mean, a rolled ankle you can recover from 2 weeks. But I remember I was kind of icing my ankle sitting on the sofa because again I didn't have a room in that in my parents' house at that point. I was just sleeping on the sofa come bed, and I was sitting on the sofa with my ankle leg elevated and ice pack strapped to my ankle, and I was just planning, okay, I'm gonna recover it in a certain way. And to put anyone who's listening to this or you in the perspective of my mind, that was the only thing that was working for me at that point, right? That this is the point where I still haven't heard back from the university about how they're gonna interpret my exams and stuff. So it's that middle point where they're still assessing, and I don't want to think about it. My relationship is not going well. I've lost my grandparents. I'm locked in my house, and I remember I was just making a note on my phone on, okay, what are the exercises I need to do to recover from my ankle injury. And while doing that, I see a notification pull out where the institute cancelled the course because of COVID. Yeah,
Oh.
mountaineering course. The only thing that I was looking forward to, which was at that point 4 months from then, was cancelled. So for me, at that point, I remember I kind of laughed and I started crying and then I laughed again. And I just thought to myself, you know what? It can't really, like, it can't get worse for me right now. It's just, this is, for me at that point, this is rock bottom for me. And that for me was a huge kind of, I wouldn't say a failure in some regards of how you would expect a setback to be a failure in, within your life. It was such a huge setback, but it was so huge that for me, I only thought to myself that, okay, fine, let's see how it goes. It's only up from here. I can't do any worse.
The worst
Uh,
has happened, right?
yeah,
There's
I
something
can't.
liberating actually about
Yeah,
that.
and I think just realizing that for me was the key. Apart from other failures earlier on in my life in terms of, set the expectations that people, my teachers, because again, my parents, both my parents are academics. My father, he was a professor, now retired. My mother was a math teacher. My sister is an English PhD. So, and she's 8 years older than me. So those expectations were both unsaid and said out loud and laid down for me. Perhaps not by my family at times, but by the teachers who knew my family, that, oh, you could do so much better. So I always felt that I was either disappointing someone or the other. And that felt very personal, and that felt like felt like a huge failure on my part. Because in my head I thought, oh, I could do so much more. Why can't I just, read this book for 20 minutes longer, or just be interested in something which everyone around me is doing. And because, there's one thing to know that you tried and you failed at it, and there's another thing in knowing that, oh, I didn't even pick the book and I still passed. What if I had picked the book? So that kind of failure feels much more personal. It feels like there's something wrong with you inherently and intrinsically. um so for me, just in retrospect, when I look at those, it it puts things into perspective. It firstly, it makes me understand how I am, and then secondly, it makes me just know that I'm very resilient. If I had if I had the resilience to go through my academics in the first, and I know that a lot of people say that their formative years is what they dream of reliving. I do not. I'm happy to have gone through my school and gotten away with it, my university, and just done with it. I'm happy. And for me, a lot of the times when I find myself in positions where I'm questioning things or where it's hard, I just always remind myself it couldn't be worse than what it was then. And it's funny because for most people it would be the best time of the year would be the school years, right? So when I see my friends talking about school, I'm always like, no, man, it was bad. It was bad. I can't go through that again. I wonder if that was for you as well once you got out of that stage of.
Oh, every year is better. And I am constantly telling people how grateful I am to be in my 40s, that I love being in my 40s more than any other time. But I want to ask you, like, so you're involved in the Katalytic Education Foundation, the Sikkim Charter School, you're involved with Follow Alice and all of these things. Where are you heading? What are you thinking of as you look to your future? What are you hoping that you get to do or be involved with?
Hmm. I think that's a question I've been thinking lately a lot of, especially in these tumultuous times, because perhaps things that we plan or intend to do,
Yeah.
in 3-4 years from now, they're not feasible anymore in 3-4 years from now. So, but if everything works out and the world, at least for the better, remains at peace, I think I, I would like to kind of start something of my own in terms of adventure travel, or something related to that. A more comprehensive way towards how we look towards nature, rather than it just being a company that takes people on adventure travel and stuff like that. And this comes from the kind of thinking that Follow Alice embeds, because it's much more about, it's a lot more than just an adventure travel company. It truly embodies the very fact that they gave me, a recent graduate with no experience in working in travel in particular, a chance to lead the entire operations eventually, but in as well within the business, shows because they valued where I was from, my knowledge of that place, and they saw something within that. Right? It wasn't because I had tons of experience in sales, which is what I started with, or operations, or within legal expertise within the travel industry. And I was the furthest away thing from what my legal expertise were at. But they took a chance because they saw potential because of my love for the mountains. I think that's what I want to kind of create going forward within an organization that looks at not just what they're trying to do, but more so what they stand for. So something which is for the mountains, for the lover of the mountains, from the people who adore being in the mountains. Something that's not just got to do with, okay, how do we make money, but more to do with, I love this, come, let me show you what I love. That emotion and embodying that emotion into something is perhaps what I want to create. In terms of education, now for me, this is my passion. I call mountaineering, trekking, my adventure travel world, the legal things I do to perhaps make money, perhaps something that I still would want it to be impactful in more than just making money. But this is my passion. I think my purpose definitely lies within what I have learned from the formative years of my life. I think I would love to see another child in the position that I was in when I was a kid and help them in some or the other way. And I think that's what I want to build. I want to build a system which is much more comprehensive about how it treats its underlings and how its underlings grow within that system. And that's something that I keep discussing this with Chuki. Chuki is the co-founder of Katalytic Education Foundation. She's the person behind the brains behind the entire foundation and someone who does all the groundwork. She's the one who runs aspects of the school, creates curriculums, etc. I keep talking to her about this. We keep bouncing things off each other, how to introduce critical thinking within the curriculum, or perhaps how to make a pathway or a ILSP, sorry, an inclusive learning special education program for kids within who perhaps are on the spectrum from the grassroots levels. And again, I'm a dreamer. She's more realistic. So because she's on ground, she sees how things
Good
are right now.
combination.
And I'm the one who's kind of like, oh, but we can do it. This is what we need to build towards. And just doing that, making sure that I'm able to impact another individual's life who perhaps has had a similar journey as me and make it easier for them. And perhaps at a certain point, have it be available for the masses within at least India, because we are so many of us. Every sixth person in the world lives in India, and every almost fifth person in the world is from Indian origin. We cannot disregard the populace of very basic things like compassion and critical thinking, especially when we come from the land of Buddha. Buddha stood for compassion, and if we can't be the ones imparting that within the generations to come, then who do we expect that from? And that's something that I think my purpose is something I need to very much work a lot on. My passion is something that I'll keep following up until I come to a point where I can be like, okay, now I'm at a position where I can just focus on the purpose of my life. Till then, it'll kind of be a bit mismatched because, again, we do live in sadly, a society wherein you have to sustain yourself. You have to, even for
Yeah.
me to create change for our education foundation, we need to create abundance of wealth for it to be able to function in that aspect. And I want to do that. Of course, I can't do that alone. I would need a lot of support, but that is the direction that I see myself taking within and balancing my passion and purpose. At least if the world remains, hopefully the world comes to peace.
Yeah. Beautifully said.
I'm nothing without the support of people around me, and that must be acknowledged in everything that I do. Every achievement that I'll have will be corresponded to the support, the people, the
Yeah.
love that everyone around me has shared. So that's something that I truly want to carry forward with me, and it shows in the work as well, right? The fact that an organization like Follow Alice gave me that opportunity. That's something I'm truly grateful for. The fact that, you know, Peter, someone whom I consider a mentor, introduced me to Chuki, which led us to start this organization and for her to do this brilliant work on ground. That I'm very grateful for. I'm grateful for my parents for, supporting me, perhaps even at times when they didn't really understand me, but always being there. I'm grateful for my partner to just kind of stick by me even through all these, you know, emotional roller coasters that I go through, and everyone goes through, and just love me unconditionally. Grateful for my friends for always being present whenever I need them. And perhaps, at times I wonder what would I be if I wasn't a reflection of everyone around me. And that's exactly who I am. I think if you see the qualities, the best of the qualities you see in me are a reflection of people who have surrounded me as I was growing up. And that's something that I want to embody, and that's exactly why I want to give back as well, because I think I've gotten a lot, regardless of the challenges I've had. I think there are a lot of kids in the world who have those challenges, at times even more challenging things that they face, but they do not have the support system that I ended up having. And that's something that I want to embody for other people. So that's what I want to do, and hopefully I am able to do that. Yeah. Yeah. And Katalytic Education Foundation, I'll send you the link to our Instagram. I think that's where most of the things get showcased alongside the website as well. But the Instagram would be the best place for you to see what we're up to. Other than that, just my personal social media. If anyone wants to reach out to me, speak about adventures, or in fact, even plan their adventures, or just have a debate about veganism, or anything for that matter, it's Puru1511, Puru1511. And yeah, you'd see a lot of photos and videos of me being in the mountains in the nature. So if you're interested in that, that's all.
If you've enjoyed today's discussion, I invite you to share this episode and subscribe to Able Pathways podcast on your favorite platform. Your support helps us to share these meaningful conversations with more people. Have thoughts about this episode or suggestions for future guests? We would love to hear from you. Leave us a comment or email us at hello@ablepathways.com. Until next time, I'm Annabelle, reminding you that there are infinite pathways to growth. May you travel yours with curiosity and courage.